6:44 right now. Next news at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Papa Nicholas Coffee. Papa Nicholas, great coffee, period.
If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, Wall Street Journal editorial board opining on Ambassador Gordon Sondland's testimony yesterday at the impeachment proceeding. His account, writes the Journal, essentially confirms that Mr. Trump had a negative view of Ukraine, was reluctant to keep supplying U.S. aid, and asked Mr. Sondland and others to work with Rudy Giuliani to press Ukraine's new president, Zelensky, to announce that he was opening an anti-corruption probe. The suggestion that we were engaged in some irregular or rogue diplomacy is absolutely false, Sondland said. In other words, the president was directing policy, as he has the right to do, and nearly everyone in security positions seemed to know about it. As we've known since Mr. Trump released his transcript of the July 25th call with Zelensky, this may have been the least secret foreign policy fiasco in memory. We're almost embarrassed as journalists that we didn't know about it. The impeachment press is hyperventilating about the elusive quid pro quo, but Mr. Sondland said nothing about aid to Ukraine being part of the quid. And under questioning, he, of course, later said, as we talked about earlier in the show, that he merely presumed there were these preconditions that there turned out not to be. And yet, hyperventilating is the right way to describe what the D.C. press corps and its outlets around the country, subordinates around the country, including in Chicago, were doing. For more on this topic and other matters of statecraft, we're pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, VP of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of books including Wiki at War and Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, just call me Colonel. Hey,
I know you've worked very hard. You've worked very hard. I know. Are you in your full dress uniform for this interview?
No, it's funny. I actually, prefer that people not use my military affiliation.
Really?
I mean, I think it's fair, in terms of explaining my expertise. I served in the military for 25 years, but and of course I deeply great, for my military service, but I don't rely on my military rank as a credential.
So if
you could call me doctor, you could call me pastor because I'm a pastor in the Universal Life Church. But here's how I want to say that.
Wait a second. If I call you Jim, you don't feel marginalized? You don't feel like I'm denigrating your military service?
No, I'm okay with that thing.
Well, Fiona Hill is specifying today, but it better be Dr. Fiona Hill because she's
Dr.
a doctor.
Hill.
Yes.
And you could call me Dr. Carafano. Matter of fact, you could call me Dr. Colonel Professor Reverend Carafano, and I would respond to that.
That's a great title.
All right, I got to make that notation. All right.
No, so seriously, as you know, I don't do politics and I don't do legal stuff. So I can tell you I haven't been closely following the impeachment hearings because we have other guys doing that. But what you just read from kind of the summary of the Wall Street Journal, from my knowledge of the Ukraine issue, which we've been working on very closely before the Russian incursion into Ukraine, and talking to government officials and people, that sounds exactly right. I mean, this was not even an open secret. The president was always skeptical of the Ukrainians. He was skeptical about helping them because he thought there was a lot of corruption there, and he required convincing that the Ukrainians were going to deal with the corruption and that they were going to be a responsible partner. That is absolutely true. He never hid that from anybody. He expressed that publicly in numerous areas, and he essentially did want to know that the Ukrainians were cleaning up their act. All that is consistent with everything I heard. And if there's a reporter that says, "Oh, gee, we couldn't have uncovered that story. That's just nuts. I mean, I think that was broadly public knowledge. What started this off is because you had a document which was purported from a whistleblower, and I question whether the document actually and the person that did it actually qualifies as a whistleblower. That portended to have some kind of secret knowledge, which now we know after many days of testimony. Literally, there's almost nothing in there that's not public knowledge, particularly since the president made the conversations publicly available. And the last thing I'll say is that the thing that's always made me skeptical is, the administration never hid any of this. If you were going to conduct an illegal act, the last thing you would do is on a presidential phone call where 27,000 people are listening it, and you know that people leak stuff. So look, I don't know what I don't know, but everything that you just read that the Wall Street Journal said, that's consistent with everything I do know.
Okay. I want to get your reaction, have a little bit of a chat about China. I interviewed former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, at her book event in Chicagoland last night because I'm
because he's damn proud.
Aren't you the one?
Yeah, I'm sort of.
He's the cat's meow.
I'm a big deal, Jim. In case you didn't know, kind of a big deal. And I asked her, this is sort of an operative question, but it's just to prompt her to give a little bit of her view on China, generally speaking. And I just asked her the simple question that I'm sure you've been asked many times. Does China represent our 21st century Cold War adversary? Is this, but with even more economic power than the Soviet Union had in the 20th century? And she didn't want to, characterize the relationship, but she did go into some detail, particularly against the backdrop of this a true blockbuster story the New York Times had over the weekend, these internal documents from the Chinese Communist Party that detail how Uyghur Muslims are being abducted. Their parents are being abducted so they can cleanse their brains to indoctrinate them, in addition to persecute them. These concentration camps, real concentration camps in the 21st century. It's really, and Nikki Haley said this as well, this is the most substantial human rights of abuse that's going on in the world right now, and she has some perspective on that. But I would put the same question to you: is how do we conceive of China in the 21st century and what they're doing to these Uyghur Muslims in their country? How do we think about that in terms of our economic engagement with them? Nikki Haley was quick to say, it doesn't mean we shouldn't trade with them and this and that. They're such an economic powerhouse. They have so many people. It's such a consumer market. It's really complicated because we've learned a lot about China ever since President Trump engaged them, and a lot of what we've learned is not good.
So we actually have a major report coming out about this, about how the United States should deal with China. It'll be on heritage.org, probably be out in just a couple of weeks. It's a companion piece to a major piece that we just published on the relationship between the United States and Europe going forward, on the future of the transatlantic community, which is also on heritage.org. So I will say, here's the difference, I think, in terms of our approach and strategy between dealing with the Soviet Union during the Cold War and dealing with China now. And not just China, but China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. The Soviet Union was perceived, and I think rightly so, as an existential threat to the United States. In other words, the very existence of the Soviet Union meant that we were constantly in peril. And as long as that evil empire was in place, America could never be safe. And the goal had to be the evil empire had to dissolve. And that was our stated strategy. We were going to keep this up until the other guy just went away. I think China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are all in the same category in that they're not perceived, and I think rightly so, as existential threats. In other words, we can live in a world where there's a China and a Russia and an Iran and a North Korea. What we can't tolerate is their destabilizing activities and their threat to essentially the United States ensuring its interest and extending its own peace and prosperity with its friends and allies.
But let me just interrupt there. Let me just interrupt there, though. Are you suggesting? Sure. Are you suggesting that China is not expansionist in the way that the Soviet Union?
Oh no,
was?
Of course not.
Okay.
No, They're absolutely. Their idea is essentially to, on the one hand, they're mercantilists. They want to carve out a giant chunk of the world that they control, so they're in power forever. And they also want to establish the norms of global behavior that are consistent with what the Chinese want. So their expansionist ambitions are vast and huge. Maybe not quite to the goal of the Soviet Union, but they are the chief destabilizing concern in the world today. And the U.S. competition with China is successfully competing with them is in many ways key to our future prosperity, safety, and freedom. So I think it's a challenge to be dealt with. But here's the difference. In the end of the day, we don't need for the Chinese Communist Party to vanish from the face of the earth, for the United States to feel secure that it's free, safe, and prosperous. What we do need to be able to do is to block their most dangerous destabilizing behavior. And what the Uyghurs tell us, and the lesson of what we're seeing in Hong Kong today, and their attitude towards Taiwan, is that these are people that cannot be trusted. And their extension of their will and authority and power is authoritarian in nature, and it's suppressive in nature. And they will not honor the deals that they will make because they are primarily concerned about the prosperity and the survival and the rule of the Chinese Communist Party. And they don't have allies. They have supplicants. That's the difference between the expansion of Chinese influence and American influence in the world.
I like it. It's a good way to lay that out. I'll be looking forward to that report from Heritage Foundation. I wanted to get your reaction to another area of the world that has been destabilized by autocrats, and that's South America because of the Maduro regime, which is very popular only among the Chicago Teachers Union here. The 4
Does he know that they took a fact-finding mission over the summer?
Yeah, Chicago Teachers Union folks, down to praise Maduro.
To see how they do it in a social.
They should have brought Noam Chomsky. He's a huge fan of Maduro.
True. Yeah, true. I don't know. He may be too fragile to travel these days. But 4 million refugees out of Venezuela, people fleeing to try to survive. Nikki Haley mentioned yesterday, the average Venezuelan has lost 24 pounds. The starvation that's going on in that country. And we've talked to individuals like Christian Cardozo, who's in Caracas and who's documenting what's happening there. It's just, it's hard to fathom.
They don't have running water. There's certain days where they'll have clean water to drink from.
No power.
Right.
No, right.
It's an entire country in poverty.
And
literally, the difference between Venezuela and North Korea is latitude.
Yeah.
In terms of the state of the people.
That's stark. And so now Peru, Ecuador are shutting down the pathways to refugees. Colombia, now under pressure, has announced plans to close its borders, and they're trying to contain strikes and protests as well as our other countries. This is particularly close to us here at AM 560 because we're working with Food for the Poor to try and raise money to feed Venezuelan refugees through Food for the Poor in Colombia. And I just wonder what, if anything, America should be doing with this refugee crisis spawned by Venezuela in South America.
Well, I think U.S. policy has been pretty consistent and pretty correct. We have to value our interests. I mean, the future of Venezuela is not a vital interest to the United States. On the other hand, it is deeply destabilizing to the region, and an unstable region is not good for us. For example, if you look at Colombia, which you brought up, we invested decades in bringing Colombia out of the narco war, creating a viable state, giving those people a future. And now Colombia has essentially become the Jordan of Latin America, where they're hosting millions of refugees, and not in camps, in the middle of their cities, straining to provide services and basic food and necessities. Enormous strain on a country like Colombia was just starting to kind of, move forward towards its future. So, look, we're not going to intervene militarily. The only thing that's propping this regime up really is the external support of the Russians and the Chinese and the Cubans. It's a very fragile control. I think at some point the consistent pressure is going to force Maduro out. I don't think that's necessarily going to open the pathway to Guaido coming in or a free and open democratic Venezuela, but it's something that might get us past the current crisis. As you know, Morales was forced out of Bolivia. That's a positive step.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Chilean government's looks like it's going to survive its current crisis, in part pressed on them, many people claim, by Venezuelan influence. Argentina is a big issue. I actually think we're not in the worst place we could be in Latin America. This administration's actually been working extremely well with the Central American countries on migrant issues, looking to try to help them to do real development, not just give them more foreign aid, but actually develop their economies and reform so they're more attractive to foreign direct investment. We continue to work with Mexico. I think this administration's doing about the right things it can and should do.
He is Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano, but you can call him Jim. Vice President of Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. They'll be coming out with a report on China. We should look forward to it, heritage.org. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good being with you. Thanks.
Take care.
And we just talked about the crisis in Venezuela and how we need your help. And for our campaign for 2019, our goal is to provide food for a year for 600 Venezuelan families living in Colombia. You can make a one-time donation. We're asking for $300, but whatever you can donate would be much appreciated. 844-862-4673, or go to 560theanswer.com, search for the keyword food, and you become a business benefactor. If you own a business or make the marketing decisions for your company, listen up. This is the best deal in Chicagoland radio. $2,500 tax-deductible donation to Food for the Poor, and as a way of saying thank you, we'll give you 40 60-second commercials that will air Monday through Friday right here on AM 560. Call our sales manager, Anjanette Netkowski.
You're getting colder.
Anjanette Netkowski, directly at 847-472-8951, or go to Food for the Poor, 560theanswer.com, and search for the keyword food.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. Uber may let an app record rides. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos reveals new college costs, and Macy's unveiling its third quarter profits today. Those stories next.
G'day, I'm Scott from Plug-in Pest Free. If you have a rodent or pest problem at your home or business, don't spray harmful toxic chemicals. Use Plug-in Pest Free, the electromagnetic pest control device that uses your wiring to get rid of pests fast. Just plug it in. One customer had a warehouse with a rat problem. He was catching over 20 rats a day. He called pest controllers, but nothing solved the problem. Then I came along. My plug-in pest-free commercial system got rid of the rats, and since then he's seen maybe 3 in the last 12 months. Plug-in Pest-Free is not a sonic device. It's chemical-free and gets rid of pests safely and effectively for years. It comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 2-year warranty. Now that's fair income. Order today and get 20% off at gopestfree.com, promo code SAVE20. That's gopestfree.com, promo code SAVE20. Don't spray and regret. Plug in and forget with Plug-in Pest-Free.
Uber plans to let passengers and drivers use its app to record